Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Dalmati Tennis Podcast. We're back again to share his reaction to the singles tournaments at the Australian Open. Novak Djokovic, the champion of the men's singles, the 9th Australian Open title for himself, and Naomi Osaka also getting hold of her second singles title at the Australian Open. Once again, of course, I'm joined by Ewan West, and just before we start, we thought we'd mention that we are now on Spotify and more podcasting platforms such as Deezer, Amazon Music. So basically, if you prefer to listen to podcasts elsewhere, have a look and see if we're on your preferred choice of platform, and there's a good chance we are. But once again, like I say, I am joined by Ewan. How are you doing, Ewan?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, I'm delighted. We've just had Grand Slam tennis back with a good crowd for most of the tournament at least. So yeah, definitely enjoyed it and a great start to the year.
I think we'll just start with the champions. Novak Djokovic, a worthy 9th Australian Open title for him.
Oh yeah, definitely a worthy 9th title, and I think one of his most challenging, with different sorts of challenges than he's faced in the past. Though with the injury he picked up in the third round in beating Taylor Fritz, the abdominal injury, the abdominal oblique, and he did reveal after the tournament that it was a tear, even though there was a lot of speculation that he wouldn't have been able to play on with it. So it was strange to see it develop. There's a lot of uncertainty over it, but he said that the injury, I forget the exact amount of millimeters, but it did, the tear had extended from when he first got it to by the end of the tournament. But in the semi-finals and final, he was able to play his best tennis, and I think in the final it was his best performance probably since the 2019 Australian Open final, where he beat Rafael Nadal. So yeah, 9th Australian Open title is, I think it really should go down as one of the greatest tennis achievements, single achievements. It's probably just the fact that Nadal's 13 French Opens is so ridiculous that it makes Djokovic's 9 Australian Opens look slightly less incredible, but they're both two of the all-time great records.
Yeah, but I'd say on that, it's probably easier to specialise on clay than it is on hard courts. I think pretty much everyone's got a solid game on hard courts. It is more or less the default tennis surface nowadays, whereas clay courts, I mean, it is default across a lot of Europe. I think most players on continental Europe start playing on clay. But I'd still say it's maybe easier to dominate on clay than it is on hard courts, and I think that's why Djokovic's record being so far ahead of anyone else's at the Australian Open. I think, if anything, it is maybe as impressive as Nadal's 13 at Roland Garros.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think for that reason, it is definitely impressive because he's faced over the years such strong competition, great hardcore players like Federer, Nadal himself, obviously a great player on all surfaces, and then Stan Wawrinka, Andy Murray. Probably you would say hardcourts are the best surface or the equal best surface. And then more recently, he's had Dominic Thiem, Medvedev, and other very good young challengers who've been strong on hardcourt. So I think for that reason, it is really impressive, and there's a good chance he could finish at least with 10 by the time he retires. And that's the parallel with Nadal at the French Open, is that he's never lost a semi-final or final at the Australian Open, which is just an incredible start. And yeah, it's ridiculous that when he gets to that stage, he has been unbeatable. It really is a testament to that he is the greatest hardcore player of all time.
Yeah, I think for definite. And in that final, I was kind of really surprised at just how dominant it was. I think Medvedev had been playing great throughout the tournament. He looked so good against Tsitsipas. I mean, we had a little discussion beforehand. I think I saw a lot of similar discussions on Twitter, the Reddit, the tennis sub threads on Reddit, just saying that Medvedev could cause Djokovic some problems. It could be Medvedev's first Grand Slam, and it could be kind of a bit of a watershed moment, and it just didn't pan out like that at all, did it, that final?
No. I think I definitely didn't expect it to pan out the way it did. And I think from what I saw, many experts and a lot of people who commented on it were expecting a great match, a very close 4 or 5 set match either way. And some, I would say, were seeing it as pretty much a 50-50, if not Djokovic the slight favourite. But yeah, I don't, with the form Medvedev had been in on a 20-match winning streak, in the form he'd shown in the quarterfinals and semi-finals, to beat quality opponents in Andrei Rublev and Stefanos Tsitsipas in straight sets wasn't really challenged. It's hard. It would have been hard to see him losing in straight sets in the final, particularly with 6-2 in the second and third sets. Yeah, I definitely didn't see it coming. I think he was near his best for the first set, and I think the first set was what we probably expected the match to be like for the whole match. It was very competitive, but Djokovic just better in the pressure moments, and it didn't seem like Medvedev really recovered, even though he got the early break in the second, but lost his serve straight away. And I think he'd been getting so many free points and dominating on serve throughout the tournament. I think he was frustrated with just how well Djokovic was returning. He was getting so many chances to break Medvedev, where usually you might only get one game in a set, if that. And I think maybe we shouldn't be surprised by Djokovic producing a masterclass in an Australian Open final, but it was still surprising the way it unfolded.
Yeah, I think for definite. When that first set finished 7-5, I thought with Medvedev's level, with how competitive it was, I thought the only danger of a straight sets would be the sets panning out very similar, kind of competitive all the way along. But Djokovic just shows that extra kind of experience, that extra ability to deal with the big pressure points. But then the second and third set didn't pan out that way. And I mean, I came very close to tweeting after the first set when Medvedev got the break in the first game of the second. Like a great reaction from Medvedev to kind of put the first set defeat behind him. But because that was another thing that worried me, whether losing that first set, which was such a big blow, having been competitive throughout, would cause a little bit of a dip. And then he breaks in the first game of the second set, and you think, no, it's still game on. But then after that, what happened in the next four games? Can you explain what happened there?
I think it's hard to explain it. I think largely I'll just point to the brilliance of Djokovic. I mean, I think it really was an incredible performance by Djokovic, probably one of his best in a Grand Slam final, like the one I mentioned in 2019 against Nadal, and obviously there's been plenty in throughout his career. But yeah, I think he was just giving Medvedev absolutely nothing, but he was playing with an aggression, striking the ball with incredible consistency, depth, power on both sides, and also the variety. I think disturbed Medvedev with occasionally you saw the short slice, the drop shot, and he just didn't allow Medvedev any free points. He didn't allow Medvedev to play the style of tennis that he had been in the tournament and in the previous meetings, which I think that's why it was surprising. I mean, Medvedev had won 3 of the last 4 against Djokovic, but it really is a different story in a Grand Slam, and particularly in an Australian Open final. I think Djokovic just took the match away from Medvedev, and in that run of 4 games, I just don't think Medvedev mentally was able to come back after that. You could see he did lose it a bit, which we have seen from him in the past, not much recently, but yeah, I think he just found it difficult to compete in that moment.
Yeah, and you mentioned the variety in Djokovic's game there. He serve volleyed a couple of times, he used a drop shot a few times, and I think, I heard the commentators say that Medvedev isn't a great volleyer, and a lot of his history does back that up. But he looked really like he'd improved that aspect of his game quite a lot. Of the ATP finals looked like he was very competent at the net and had the ability to kind of switch it up and surprise his opponents. But I also feel in this match, I don't know whether he went within himself, whether because those shots hadn't worked when he tried them, that he decided not to try them. But I'd say variation was a huge difference between the two players. I don't think we saw much variation from Medvedev. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think that's something he has used at times in the past to affect possibly more as a surprise tactic rather than a regular tactic. But we have seen him, like you mentioned, at the ATP finals. He did serve volley at times. He came to the net and had a decent success rate in the past against Djokovic. When he has had success, he's rolled the dice on the second serve by almost hitting 2 first serves at times, like he did in Cincinnati, and he had great success. Didn't hit many double faults in that match, and maybe that was something he could have tried earlier on to try and take the racket out of Djokovic's hands, but at the same time, it's difficult to execute that over best of 5 sets without losing a lot of second serve points through double faults. So yeah, I think we could have probably seen more variety from him, but I think maybe he felt the way he was playing that his solid baseline game, where he's just going to make Djokovic be him. He likes to stand from behind the baseline, and he's so tough to beat, but is able to find length. I think he thought that was going to be enough to compete, but with Djokovic at his best, Medvedev wasn't at his best. after the first set, and he just wasn't able to carry on the challenge that he started the match with.
I don't think you can ever just put the ball back in play and wait for Djokovic to miss. I think Djokovic has got to have an off day for that to work, and I think in the second and third set especially, it did become a bit like that. Just one more then before we move on from talking about the final itself and more on the whole tournament. Do you think nerves played a big part in Medvedev's performance? And with that said, has your kind of confidence, well, it wasn't really a confidence, just a prediction pre-season that we will see an outside of the big three slam winner this year, has that at all been affected by the way this tournament and the final panned out?
Well, yeah, I mean, firstly on the nerves, I think there was some signs of nerves in the opening 3 games where obviously, I mean, Djokovic raced to a 3-love lead, but again, it's hard to know how much that was. Djokovic was excellent, and Medvedev didn't actually miss a first serve in that first game where he got broken. Djokovic managed to get everything back. So I thought it maybe looked like a slightly nervous start, but after that, it seemed like he'd recovered. So I think what we saw in the second, third sets wasn't necessarily nerves. I think it was maybe just frustration with how the match was going. I don't think it looked like the occasion got to him. I could be wrong on that, but I don't think it was quite the same as I would say probably the occasion got to Tsitsipas in the semi-final against Medvedev. And yeah, I'm still confident Medvedev's going to win Grand Slams, but as you said, will it be this year as we predicted? I think you picked him to win the US Open. I picked Dominic Thiem, so we've picked an outside player to win a slam. I still think there's a good chance that could happen, and the US Open's probably the most likely place we're going to see that. I mean, I think we both thought Djokovic would win here, but yeah, it maybe is slightly worrying that Medvedev didn't really test him in the way we expected in the final, but I still think we're going to see there's still a chance we could see Medvedev or Thiem. It would be one of those two I'd pick to win probably at the US Open. But I suppose if Djokovic plays like this and gets a bit better luck than he's had at the US Open the past couple of years with the disqualification and the injury, he'll still be the favourite to win that as well.
Yeah. So just moving on to more of the tournament now. I mean, I think we'll just start with how enjoyable was it? Did it deliver for you on the long wait?
Well, yeah. Overall, I thought I did enjoy it, but I think as we discussed as well, probably the first half of the tournament was more enjoyable than the second half. Definitely on the men's side, but I would say probably on the women's side if we're going to include the fourth round, sort of somewhere in between. But definitely, I thought there was more great matches probably in the early rounds, and we did have on the men's side a straight sets final, 2 straight sets semi-finals. On the women's side, a straight sets final, probably Osaka Serena, which will come on, who didn't really deliver, and the other semi-final was a 3-setter, but there wasn't as many epic matches in the back end of the tournament that you'd like to see. But overall, it was an entertaining tournament, and maybe the greatest start of the tournament made up for that.
Yeah, I think that first week, there was just so many unbelievable matches to choose from, but there was some that I missed as well, such as Wawrinka's match against, was it Fucsovics, the 5-set match. I watched the start of that match, went to sleep, saw that it ended in 5 sets, and I was just like, oh, it's a shame I missed that. And there was a lot of kind of very close battles on both sides in that first half, and a lot of players kind of pulling off shocks or semi-shocks as well. There was a lot of shocks on the women's side in that regard. So it did promise so much that first week of the tournament, but then in the second week there was a lot more straight setters, just less exciting matches in general. I think there's a couple of exceptions to that, of course. Another thing is quite a lot of players reporting minor discomforts or pulling out of matches altogether. Do you think kind of, I mean, I know the quarantine was necessary to even get the tournament on, but do you think kind of this quarantine period, not being able to hit much or as much as I'd liked to in the previous weeks, building up to the slam, actually had an effect on kind of, well, more of an effect as the tournament went on?
Yeah, I think it must have been a factor, and I think I've heard Djokovic mention it in his post-final press conference, and a couple of other players mentioned it. But yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that there were so many similar types of injuries. We saw, I think, 4 or 5 players with abdominal injuries, including Djokovic, Kieran Booster, just to name a couple. Then there was a couple of players with back injuries as well, which Nadal got pre-tournament, Dimitrov got during the tournament. So I think being in hard quarantine, and particularly we saw some of the players who are in the 14-day hard quarantine lose early. I think it must have been a factor, and I'd seen him mention that possibly the type of work the type of fitness work he might be doing more in the hotel room, such as sit-ups and work on the abs might have been a reason for that.
Yeah. But I mean, we have mentioned how good the first week of the tournament was, and I mean, there's a couple of stories that have obviously emerged out of the tournament. The main one we'll come on to. There was also Kokinakis as well. Was quite an interesting case for me. He's not been able to play tennis much for a fair few years now after a very promising start to his career. Won the first round. Took Tsitsipas all the way to 5 in the second round, which is something I mean you can be very proud of. But we'll come on to one of the main talking points now. Aslan Karatsev, the Russian ranked outside the top 100, came through qualifying. Actually, if you count the qualifying, he's won 8 matches at the Australian Open, more than Djokovic has won. So, I mean, is he a one-tournament wonder? What have you made of him?
Well, yeah, it really is an incredible run and an incredible story. And I mean, it's not really comparable to anything we've seen in a Grand Slam. I mean, I've looked at it, and 114th ranked player, as reaching the semi-finals as a qualifier is incredible. I mean, the only thing you look at is Ivanisevic winning Wimbledon in 2001. He was ranked 125 in the world, but he was already a 3-time Wimbledon finalist. So, I mean, for Karatsev to pretty much come from the tennis wilderness and reach a Grand Slam semi-final and upset the players he did, like Schwartzman, Dimitrov. Okay, Dimitrov was injured, but then Alger-Aliassime from 2 sets to left down as well. I mean, it really is ridiculous. And from what I've seen from him, I wouldn't expect him to be a one-tournament wonder. Maybe we won't see this. I'm not saying he's going to be a consistent Grand Slam semi-finalist, but I mean, he's moved up to 42nd in the world now, so we're really going to get a chance to see him at tour events because he doesn't have any points to defend really, since he'd only played on the Challenger Tour, barring I think 1 or 2 tour-level events last year. So he's got a big opportunity to gain points. And just looking at his game, he's got a big serve, a huge forehand, and then a rock-solid backhand. Seems to move pretty well, actually quite comfortable at the net, and mentally seems pretty calm and mentally strong as well. So I think we're definitely going to see him as a consistent top 50 player. I would expect, as long as he doesn't get injured, which has been maybe why we haven't seen him until now. And I think he could definitely move inside the top 30, maybe even push towards the top 20 this year because he has so few points to defend.
Yeah, and he had some success on the Challenger Tour last year, and I think, was it Sergei Stakhovsky had a go at a few journalists for mentioning that they'd never heard of him, saying that he'd been coming, he was quite clearly playing at a level below the one he belonged at for quite a while now. So in that regard, does that raise kind of new questions about kind of accessibility to the tour for players? The fact that he hasn't really played in the main tour at all really until now, but yet he's so clearly of the level to at least play. He's at least top 50 level, surely.
Yeah. I think it is a really strange case, but as I mentioned, I think it's hard to say how we haven't seen any of them until now. Okay, I think he's played in Moscow or St. Petersburg a couple of times as a qualifier or a wild card. He did have a win against Mikhail Yuzny, I think in 2015. But besides that, I mean, we've seen so little of him. But I think 2017 he did have a really serious knee injury, and before that point he was moving towards the top 100. Before that derailed him, and he had success on the Challengers and Futures Tour. So maybe this is something we would have seen earlier if his progress hadn't been halted there. But yeah, it shows it isn't easy to make that breakthrough from the Challenger Tour. You really need to have consistent results of winning challenges, making deep runs consistently to move in the top 100. But I'm glad he has finally got there.
And the final one on this one for me, I don't know if it is a factor, but I was thinking with the qualifiers being played a fair few weeks before the actual tournament, Has that had an effect on kind of the runs that qualifiers have been able to make? So it maybe give them more flexibility around the preparation rather than playing on the weekend before the start of the main draw. I mean, a lot of players play on the weekend before the start of the main draw anyway, because there'll be a 250 or a 500 or something that they'll play at, and if they make the final of, then they're playing just before the start of the main draw of the slam. But I mean, just for qualifiers to have that extra flexibility to decide whether they'll want to play a tournament or whether they'll want to train. I mean, Karatsev did play in the ATP Cup, mainly in doubles. Do you think if having qualifiers for slams a couple of weeks before the slam itself could see more, maybe not stories quite as ridiculous as this one, but more successful qualifiers actually within the tournament?
Yeah, I think it surely has to help. I mean, so if slams are going to be able to do that scheduling wise, I think it would be a good thing. It might be difficult to work into the calendar, but I think there's no doubt it's you definitely prefer to play it either 1, 2, or even 3 weeks before in this case, rather than the weekend before. Because if you play a couple of grueling qualifying matches, you're going to struggle to get through more than a round or two. I mean, we have seen qualifiers have some decent runs, but yeah, very rarely anything like this, and it still looked fresh by the end of it. He didn't look like he was drained despite playing a 5-set match, a 4-set match. So yeah, I think he could definitely help qualifiers if this does continue.
Yeah, so it's just some interesting discussions there around Karatsev's success and maybe what it could mean for the future. But we'll move on again now to our matches of the tournament. Do you have any in mind?
Yeah, I've got a few in mind. Probably, well, I've got a short list, but if I'm going to pick one, I would say of the list, Tsitsipas against Nadal in the quarterfinals, Thiem against Kyrgios in the third round, Shapovalov against Sinner in the first round, and then on the women's side, I would say Muguruza against Osaka in the fourth round, and probably Serena against Sabalenka in the fourth round as well. And for me, the pick probably on both sides would be, I thought maybe Tsitsipas against Nadal was a higher quality match, but the one I probably enjoyed the most was Thiem against Kyrgios, because it was just such a crazy match with everything that was the way Kyrgios started the match. I mean, whatever people think of Kyrgios, I don't see how you could not be entertained watching that match and what he was producing in the first 2 sets. I mean, with the underarm serve on set point, I mean, you just don't see that from anyone else. And then Thiem incredibly raising his level in the third set onwards to turn it around, which, I mean, you'd obviously never reel him off, but just Kyrgios did feel almost like it was going to be extremely difficult to stop him. He was riding the wave with, I mean, one of the most raucous atmospheres I think you'd ever hear, with the crowd behind him there on John Cain Arena. And it was an incredible effort from Thiem to turn that around. And by the end, he was pretty much unplayable. So yeah, that would probably, for me, be my favorite match on either of the 2 draws. And I would say Osaka against Muguruza would be the best in the women's draw. Obviously, Osaka saving 2 match points in the third set. I mean, that, from what I saw, looked like a really high quality match, and the crucial match in the tournament for Osaka.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when that Shapos in the first round, I think I'd already declared that the match of the tournament. It was just such a high quality for a first round match, and it had a bit of everything. Just 2 very talented young players with quite entertaining styles as well. Shapo loves that jumping backhand, doesn't he? Which always looks excellent when it comes off. So I think at that point, I'm like, that's a match of the tournament right there in the first round. But then that Thiem Kyrgios match just was something else. I mean, the showmanship, I mean, both players have an element of it. I know Thiem's a lot more disciplined than Kyrgios, but some of his shot making is excellent to watch, and everyone loves Thiem's one-handed backhand. It is one of the most beautiful shots in tennis right now. I think it was one thing that gets me around the analysis of that match is we all say about the underarm serve on set point, ridiculous, unbelievable. There's only one player that'll pull that off. But then he attempts a routine kind of volley. He attempts a tweener volley instead on just a basic game point on his own serve to keep that set on serve. misses it, and then all of a sudden it's just certain times you've got to have discipline, and it's like, well, if he pulled it off, would be saying something completely different. But that ended up being quite a turning point in that match, didn't it?
Oh, I did. Yeah, I think you're right on that, and I'll probably be guilty of that myself because I was saying in that moment, yeah, you can do it at 40 love, but you can't do it at juice 4-all in the fourth. But yeah, I suppose if he does it, he's got to do it at any moment because that's the way he plays. But yeah, I mean, it wouldn't actually looking back on that, it wasn't an easy shot to play. I mean, you would have had to hit a low short forehand or a half volley, but it just did feel like a mistake. Of course, he lost the next 2 points and was broken, but yeah, it was a turning point because I think had he held there, at worst he might have got to a tiebreak in the fourth set, the match, and that would have probably been his best chance to close out the match. But it did feel after that he was hanging on a bit in the fifth set. But yeah, it was brilliantly entertaining.
Yeah, and for myself, I think the 60 past Nadal was also a part of my thinking. But I'd still go Team Kyrgios above it for match of the tournament on both sides, really, because just the extra kind of the unpredictability around it, what was just brilliant. But that 60 past Nadal match was also a great match. I think a great 5-set tennis match just does involve these kind of ebbs and flows in momentum. 1 second you think one player's going to win, then a couple of big points, such as Nadal's big misses in the tiebreak, smashes, which is usually so good with smashes. It's not like Djokovic has kind of a reputation of being a bit inconsistent on his smash, but Nadal is not someone you ever expect to miss one. And kind of that's another element of great tennis matches, just those minor little mistakes that you don't think are too important at the time turn out to be so influential on the final result. But on the women's side, I've also agreed with you on the Osaka Muguruza match, and once again, it's for kind of similar reasons. Not only the quality on display, but also that those ebbs and flows in momentum. Saving match points, going on to win the match. I think that's kind of what makes great tennis matches. But moving on from this, the Grand Slam race, Djokovic now up to 18, 2 behind Federer and Nadal. Based on the evidence here, especially that final coming up against one of the most informed players in tennis right now, and beating him in straight sets, he's got a lot more slam wins left in him, hasn't he, Djokovic?
Yeah, I would think so. And I think, yeah, the slam race has obviously never been closer or more fascinating with Nadal and Federer just 2 ahead of Djokovic on 20. But yeah, I think I said before the tournament, I thought Djokovic needed this one. And I was actually surprised to hear Goran Ivanisevic said after the tournament he thought Djokovic needed this as well. But I just got that feeling because after he'd missed out at the US Open last year in unfortunate circumstances and hadn't had the chance to win at Wimbledon last year where he was the heavy favorite, I felt if he hadn't won here his favorite Grand Slam, the court that he owns in the final, I thought it would have been a blow, and to still be on 17, it would have felt quite a long way away from 20. Obviously Nadal didn't win the tournament anyway; he'd lost to Tsitsipas, but it would have felt a big gap to make up. But now on 18, for me it's hard to see Djokovic and Nadal not both reaching 21 slams at least. Probably 22 I could see. I think it'll be very close between those two. And then it's a question of whether Federer is going to be able to win another slam. I mean, you can't rule him out, but I would say it's probably unlikely. So, but it's definitely going to be fascinating to see. And I think Nadal and Djokovic, it could be very close between them in the end.
Yeah, I think it probably does boil down to those two as well. For Nadal, the fact that he's still here competing at the Australian Open, getting to the quarterfinal, playing some great tennis to a point that some people, including myself, thought if Nadal's going to win the Australian Open, it's going to be this year. He's playing so well on these courts, and then obviously that match against Tsitsipas happened. But the fact that Nadal's still competing in tournaments where he's got maybe the least chance of winning shows that he's still got a big appetite to keep playing, keep training hard, keep playing almost a full calendar. And if he's doing that, he's winning at least the French Open for me for another year, maybe even another 2 years. So I think Nadal makes 21 at a minimum. He gets a French again this year. 22 maybe. I think he'll probably still be playing next year based on the evidence of the last couple of years. So I'm saying a minimum of 22 for Nadal, plus you can't rule him out completely in hard court slams. So maybe even more. Djokovic, I think he definitely surpasses 20, because if there isn't a breakthrough from Medvedev and team to win more slams, team get another slam with a more complete draw, or Medvedev getting his first, then Nadal's his only other real competition, I think. And Djokovic is still the heavy favourite over Nadal on hard courts. So I'd say I'm backing Djokovic for Wimbledon again this year. I'd say the US Open maybe more competitive, but I think I'm edging more towards Djokovic for that now. So I have Djokovic maybe reaching 20 by the end of this year. And then he's still got another couple of years in him at this level, I think. Have you ever seen him serve as good as he is now? Because that's another weapon to his game as he gets older, to be able to shorten points a bit more.
No, I don't think I have. I mean, his first serve has been incredible. I mean, particularly we saw it in the final, the semi-final, and also in the quarterfinal against Zverev, which for me was probably the crucial match in his title run, because he did save a set point in that fourth set. Which, I mean, if that match had gone fifth set, he was struggling slightly physically in that match. It was a really close match, and who knows if it had gone five and even if he'd won, it might have taken a bit out of him. But yeah, I mean, his serve really bailed him out when he needed it in that match, and he was hitting the lines regularly and consistently serving over 200 kilometers per hour. It was the best I think I've seen him serve, particularly when he really needed it. And I think, again, we mentioned Goran. I think working with Goran, who's one of the greatest servers in the history of the game, and also renowned for being a great serve coach, as he worked with Raonic and Marin Cilic when Cilic won the US Open. He's got Djokovic to lower his ball toss, and I think, he's turned the serve into a massive weapon when, in that 2009 to 10 period of Djokovic's career, it was a bit of a liability. So yeah, when you add that to his baseline game, it's pretty scary.
Yeah, I think we will move on to talking more about the women's tournament now. But before then, I just want to mention, I think if I was picking a most underwhelming match of the tournament, I would pick Djokovic and Raonic, partly because Djokovic's serve was so good, and the way I saw that match was two players with injury problems, clearly feeling some discomfort, trying to shorten points, and I was expecting it to be quite a competitive match, but the points were so short, and I mean, at 4 sets it is relatively competitive, but it's just not what I was expecting of that match. But yeah, moving on to the women's tournament now. Osaka obviously comes away with the championship. Is it the 4th Grand Slam title, I want to say, for Osaka? Is she going to be maybe the dominant force in women's tennis for years to come for you?
Yeah, I think there's a real chance she could be. I mean, at 23, like you say, she's already won 4 Grand Slams, won all 4 of her finals, and all on hard courts. She's won 4 out of the last 6 hardcore slams. So I mean, she has shown she's becoming the dominant player on hard courts, where 2 of the 4 slams are held. So I think, yeah, she is already shown signs of being a dominant force. I mean, obviously, I think we're going to see a challenge by the likes of Bianca Andreascu when she gets back to full fitness, and there's a lot of strong players already still around, like Halep, Serena is still a factor. But yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how she goes on clay and grass, where her results haven't matched anywhere near her hardcore performances so far, but they are more difficult surfaces, and I think that'll be a big goal for her to really have stronger runs at the French Open and Wimbledon this year. But definitely Osaka's looking on a strong course to possibly claim the #1 ranking now as well, I would say.
Yeah, that final against Jennifer Brady was also a straight sets win, just like the men's final. And I think Osaka well on top in that match. Was you expecting that?
Yeah, I was expecting it probably once the final came about. I mean, it was a brilliant run for Jennifer Brady. I mean, she got over the line in a tight semi-final against Mugova, who, I mean, we'll come on to that definitely. But in the final, I thought Osaka would just have a bit too much. I mean, they played in the US Open semis last year, and it was a really great 3-set match. But I thought Osaka would just be a bit too strong. I mean, it was competitive in the first set, but I think Brady lost a serve 7-stay in it at 4-5 from 40-15 up, made a few bad errors, and then didn't really recover in the second set. Osaka sort of run away with it and just showed she's a slight level above Brady. But I mean, I've been really impressed with Brady. She's a player who's improved so much in the past year. I mean, this is going to take it to close to the top 10. I think we'll probably see her in the top 10 at some point this year.
Yeah, and I think we've already mentioned slightly that there was kind of a lot of shocks along the way in the WTA, well, the women's side of the draw, but one person that was dishing out a fair few of those shocks was, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of her name, but is it Sue Wei Shea? Yeah. Such a strangely excellent player to watch.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, and that was definitely something I didn't quite see coming. I mean, it was her first Grand Slam quarterfinal of career in singles, and she's 35. And yeah, I mean, she knocked out Andreascu in the second round pretty convincingly. I think took out Vondrousova in the fourth round as well. I mean, it was a fantastic run, and like you say, she's a really unusual but entertaining player. Watch has a very unorthodox game with the two-handed strokes on both sides. And just a pure timer of the ball. But yeah, Osaka was too strong for her in the quarterfinals. But yeah, she's a really she's a fun player to watch, and also Mukova, also a player with variety who pulled off some big upsets. I mean, obviously she's a seeded player and definitely known to be a talent, but I definitely didn't see her coming through to the semi-finals. I mean, she had a big upset against Pliskova in the third round, who she had beaten before at Wimbledon, but in the second set she came from 5-love down to win the set 7-5, which I mean is crazy against a player with Pliskova's serve, and then also knocked out Mertens in the fourth round. He'd been in great form, and I mean probably the biggest upset for me was beating Ash Barty in the quarterfinals from a set down and looking dead and buried. I mean, I really didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, and also moving on to kind of the semi-finals. Osaka Serena, it was a match very, very build up beforehand. But it panned out, but it wasn't as competitive as I think we'd have all liked it to be. Did you watch that match? What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I've seen most of the match, and definitely, of course, it was always going to be massively hyped up. I think maybe justifiably because Serena had looked really good to me from what I've seen of her. She'd improved her movement from what we've seen in the past 2 or 3 years. Her movement did look a lot stronger, and I always thought it was going to be a tough match. I was probably just leaning towards Osaka, but I definitely thought it would be probably a 3-setter and a lot closer. But yeah, to see Serena just really not turn up, and I think the occasion get to it. We have seen it a couple of times in the Slam final she's played, which she's lost in recent years in straight sets. But yeah, I didn't quite see it coming. Osaka put in a really professional performance. I don't think she actually needed to be at best, but it was a slightly disappointing match.
Yeah, and just a bit more on Serena. I mean, she had a great run. She was playing such good tennis. That match against Halep, I watched, and against Simona Halep playing very well as well throughout the tournament. Just beating her, kind of dominating her. It did make me think, right, Serena, she's back near her best, and she may cause problems. And for you, does this cast doubt kind of how far she was behind Osaka in the semi-final based on how well she played beforehand? Does it cast doubt that she's maybe got the ability to overcome that challenge?
I think it's definitely concerning, given how good she looked in the previous rounds. But I think at the same time, there's definitely positives to take from what she showed early in the tournament. I mean, like you say, it was an unbelievable performance against Halep. I think that's probably the best performance I've seen from Serena in a long time. And I think she can definitely take the positives from the improved movement. And the good thing is Osaka, who's probably on a level of her own at the moment. Serena's, for me, her best chance to win a slam would be at Wimbledon, where we haven't seen, obviously she's barely played, but Osaka isn't anywhere near as comfortable on grass as on hard courts because she just hasn't played on it, having not played juniors. So I would still say if they were to meet on grass at Wimbledon, it could be a different dynamic than on hard courts. But yeah, it is a concern that even after she's made these improvements, she's got to a big match and still been unable to perform anywhere near her best.
Yeah, for me, I'm still feeling quite confident on my pick for Muguruza at Wimbledon. Based on that match against Osaka pushing her so close, and with her past performances on grass often being very good, and then very bad. She kind of has this weird thing with Wimbledon. She either makes a final or wins it sometimes, and then she'll be out first round, second round next year. But that does take us on to kind of other impressive players. I think we both talked about Swiatek beforehand, saying that she would prove her ability on hard courts, and she made the fourth round, I think it was, and was maybe expected to go one or two better, but she was impressive, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was impressive. I thought it was a pretty solid run from her to back up a French Open title win. Obviously, in the last slam she played, and yeah, I thought Halep was just a bit too good, really, in that fourth round match. I mean, Swiatek played really well to win the first set. I mean, I think a level did drop, but part of that was just due to Halep's fantastic defense, and she was also able to hit with more depth and power, and just really extracted errors from Swiatek in that match. And it was a much closer match than the previous two that played, which had been the previous 2 years at the French Open, where each of them had won one of them really one-sided in really one-sided fashion. So I still think it was a positive tournament for Swiatek, but Halep surprised me a bit. I had a bit of concern over whether she had a back injury going in, which she'd shown in the tune-up tournament the week before, but Halep looked really good.
Yeah, I think for myself, I don't know if you agree, but we did talk about that bottom half of the draw in the women's tournament before the tournament, with the fact that there was so many kind of slam champions and just other great players in that half of the draw, and I do think it did actually deliver on its promise. There was a lot of great matches on that side of the draw.
Yeah, there were, and I think the other one I'm probably mentioned, yeah, it was Serena against Sabalenka in the fourth round. That was a really high quality match. I mean, Sabalenka's been one of the most informed players on the tour this year and at the back end of last year, and I think she did. We haven't seen her really produce her best at a slam yet, and I thought she did produce a high level in that match, just narrowly losing it 6-4 in the third set. Maybe mentally there's been question marks over it at times, but I still think it was a positive tournament. It's not really a bad loss to lose to Serena in the form she was in, but that was a great match to watch, of just brutal ball striking from both of them. I don't think there's two players who, I mean, Serena just went toe to toe with Sabalenka, who's probably known as the most aggressive, hard hitting baseliner. And yeah, it was definitely entertaining.
Yeah, and Ash Barty as well, home tournament. I think you tipped her to win, and I think I tipped her for an early exit based on kind of the lack of tennis she played during kind of the return of the sport from the coronavirus pandemic. I think it panned out somewhere in between the two of us, where she did put together a very good run, but probably is coming away quite disappointed that she couldn't go about one step further.
Yeah, and I think maybe I underestimated the effect of not playing for nearly virtually 12 months would have had. But I mean, I picked her before that, but then I stuck with it after I saw she looked really good to win the tune-up title, and then in the rounds previous to the loss to Muguruza, I thought she looked really good. So I thought we'd at least see her come through at the final, and I might have changed my mind and thought Osaka would have beaten her in the final, but I was still surprised. Even maybe it's understandable, as I say, given she'd hardly played, but it was a bit of an inexplicable loss to Muguruza for me from a set and a breakup. She just, see how she went away, and I think there's been a lot of talk she was affected by Muguruza's medical timeout, but it was still surprising. But I think maybe we could forgive her for this one. It's given a lack of match practice.
I think she'll take a lot of positives from the tournament still. She has been out of action a long time. There was a few players that have been out of action returning. Another was Bianca Andreascu. Was it a second round defeat in the end? Was you expecting her return to go better than that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was probably expecting her to make the fourth round or thereabouts, where I think I would have had her to play Kvitova, for me, that was another big upset. She lost in the second round to Sorana Castella. I didn't see that one come in. But yeah, I mean, of course, playing Shea in the second round, which can be a really, really tricky match, especially if you're not at her best. So maybe it was just too early to see that. And then she did play the tournament, which was held in the second week of the Australian Open, which a lot of WTA players who'd gone out early ended and got to the semi-finals there. So I think maybe it's just going to take a bit of time for Andreascu to get back to her best, but it was a little surprising.
And just another performance to pick up on, Sofia Kenin's title defence didn't go great. What are your thoughts for her going forward? Because I think she also went out of the Phillip Island Trophy quite early as well the following week. But is it just a dip? Is she going to return to the level she produced before?
Yeah, well, I thought from what I'd seen from her in the warm-up events and also Abu Dhabi in January, I didn't think she looked great. I mean, I thought she did look below her best. So I thought there was a chance that she would lose to Jennifer Brady in the fourth round, but I didn't see her going out as early as she did in the second round. So it's slightly concerned for her, but she has since had an appendix surgery after that Phillip Island loss that you mentioned. So I think maybe it's hard. She didn't really mention whether how long that's been a factor for her, but she could have been playing with some pain, or that definitely could have been an impact on why we've seen her below her best to start this year.
Yeah, I thought we'd take a bit of a look now at our predictions and how they panned out. I mean, the headline for you, I think, is getting the men's final spot on. Djokovic Medvedev with a Djokovic win, but I think in the run up to that, it wasn't fully accurate. Even though you got there in one piece, you took a few blows along the way, and for myself, I was miles away on the men's side. Just take us through it.
Yeah, I was pretty pleased with that one to get the final right. I mean, even before the tournament, I would have expected it to be a 4 or 5 set. I think I said 5-set final. So I mean, but yeah, I was pleased to get the two finalists. I mean, I think I had Nadal in the other semi-final against Medvedev, which was obviously very close to happening. But I'm on the other side. I mean, yeah, I don't think anyone saw Karatsev coming through there. I would have had the team, but yeah, we didn't mention too much. Teams lost to Dimitrov. I mean, he definitely didn't look right physically. I mean, Dimitrov was playing great, and then obviously he got injured as well in the next round or before that match, but played it. And yeah, I think a bit of a surprise not to see team come through, but definitely was something wrong there. So not on the women's side, you were definitely right with Osaka win the title, but we both had Azarenka going much further, and she lost in the first round, but she had been in hard quarantine. That could definitely have been a factor, but it was Jessica Pegula she lost to, who had a fantastic run at the quarterfinals, which I think she surprised a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely surprised me. I don't think I actually gave her much thought at all when drawing up those predictions. I mean, that predictions podcast we mentioned, it has done very well. I hope that it didn't do well amongst bettors who were looking for tips, because we'd have some very disappointed people. For me, the main one was Roberto Batista Agut as well. I predicted him to make the quarterfinal before falling to Medvedev. I thought he'd come past Rublev. He didn't even end up coming past the first round, and that's actually proved a problem for me elsewhere, because I took part in the Love Tennis Podcast's fantasy league. If you don't know how it works, it's quite interesting. I'd advise you to take part in it in the future. You just pick kind of a top seeded player, so one of the top 4 seeds, then any other seeded player, a qualifier, a wild card, an unseeded player, and basically you just get points for each match for win. And for a while I was actually rock bottom, because I picked Roberto Batista Agut as my seeded player, because I was predicting him to make at least the 4th round, at least a quarterfinal. And then part of me said Medvedev will beat Batista Agut in that quarterfinal, but there's a chance that Batista Agut beats Medvedev. He's got a positive head-to-head over him. And I'm like, if I pull this off, I'll look like a genius and I'll win the whole thing, because nobody will have picked RBA. But that didn't work out for me at all. On the women's side, I think, okay, I did predict a winner right, but I can't take much credit because I also predicted Azarenka to be in that final against her, and that just didn't pan out at all. Moving on though, I think quite keen to move on from that one. We'll end it with kind of a wholesome story. I think whenever you talk about Andy Murray, it's got to be wholesome. He's making his return to the tour. He should have been at this tournament, but sadly got COVID just before the kind of chartered flights to take the players over to start the hard quarantine flew out to Australia. Instead, he ended up playing at the Biella Challenger in Italy, and he put together a somewhat encouraging run before falling to Marchenko in the final. Did you watch much of Murray that week?
Yeah, so I didn't actually see the final, and I mean, from what I saw from the scoreline, it didn't look like he played great in that. But I mean, apparently Marchenko was pretty impressive. But yeah, I did see pretty much at least some of all the other matches, and I thought his level looked decent. I mean, it was a bit of a grind at times, but I thought, I mean, he had a tough first round opponent in Martira, and he did well to come down from a set down there, and he beat Matthias Borg in the semifinals, who he'd actually played a 5-set match against the 2016 French Open, I think, in the second round. So that was quite an interesting rematch. Probably didn't think we'd get to see those two play each other again. And Murray was pretty impressive in that one. So I think overall a really positive week to get, I think, 5 matches under his belt, 4 wins, and he showed a decent level. Physically, he looked okay. So I'm looking forward to seeing him back in action in Montpellier.
Yeah, a couple of people he played along the way, I think, had been ranked inside the top 100 at some point in their careers. I think Martira was one of them. He ended up pulling out of the second week of Biella. I think he had to, if he wanted to make the Montpellier tournament, to enter kind of their quarantine period or something like that. So you can understand it on that side, wanting to play 250, so it being a necessity to pull out. But that second week of Biella, the draw looks really good. There was Davidovich Fokina, who I think is still ranked well inside the top 100. There was Gulbis, who's now ranked quite low, but obviously was so much higher at one point. Sonego, was it? No, Lorenzo Massetti, a big young talent. Obviously, he's played main draw tennis, hasn't he? So, I mean, you can understand wanting to play 250, but do you think that second week of Biella would have been a really kind of useful draw, not being too challenging, but also some players that had kind of an ability to beat him and would be an interesting kind of challenge for him?
Yeah, well, I mean, hearing that list of names, I think they wouldn't look out of place in a 250 draw, probably in the last stages of a draw like that, but certainly in the early rounds. And yeah, I think he would have faced a good level of competition to see where he's really at if he had stayed in there. But as you say, I can understand him wanting to enter a 250 event where he's going to get a strong level of competition as well, and possibly play Yannick Sinner in the second round if they both come through, which could be a really interesting one to look forward to. Hopefully, I'd like to see that match happen, and obviously a 250 potential to gain more points. So if you can have a decent run there, you might look to move back inside the top 100. But it's definitely positive to see him back and playing and looking fit.
So the final thing I'll say on Biella before wrapping up, it makes me really appreciate that along the line somewhere there was thinking in tennis that we can paint a hard court any colour we want. So let's paint it a good colour for the ball to stand out. Because I mean, you said you watched a bit of the tournament of the Murray Games. I think so. You'll have noticed as well that they had this silver court. On the broadcast, on the stream that ATP Challenge TV do, it almost had this greeny tint to it, and the ball was really hard to follow.
Yeah, no, it was quite hard to see at times. So I don't know, yeah, whether that's the color of the core, the picture, but I mean, it wasn't ideal. And I'm someone who quite likes to see a few different colors of hard courts, because I mean, I think dark blue, even I can understand why it's used because it's a great contrast with the ball, but I think maybe it's overused at times. So I do like to see a a variety, but that wasn't ideal.
No. I think they had pink courts for the WTA finals one year, didn't they? It is interesting to see different court colours as long as it's still easy to track the ball. But blue clay is not needed. Never try that again. It'll only cause about 50 YouTube videos to be made of it in the future about what went wrong with blue clay. So if any tournament organisers are out there thinking blue clay, let's try that. It's already been done. It didn't work out. Don't bother. But I think that's all we've had to talk about for his Australian Open review, and hope you enjoyed it. We once again, we're not very well structured, so we don't know when we'll be back. But we will be back, so keep an eye out. And like I say, we are on more platforms now, so if you prefer to listen rather than watch on YouTube, look out for us on there.